And okay, so the thing is about reaching into the darkness, because if we are disconnected, and on my French side, I surely was, if we are disconnected and we reach into it, we don't know what's going to be in there. We don't know if the root is rotten, right? But we believe it, we believe it. We believe it's good. We're going to do that. So when we reach in, all these fears jump up. And here's what Jurgen wrote to me about the fears. And he was quoting James Baldwin, and he talked about from the viewpoint of being a settler. He said, and of course, white supremacy and nationalism of various kinds, there's a fear about not being exceptional, right? And the fear of being an integral part of the natural world, the fear of not having control, or at least the promise of control in the future, the fear of mystery, and the fear of having to pay attention to the world around in ways indigenous philosophies and practices suggest. So I'm saying that because this is not an easy, initiation is not an easy thing to undergo. So if you're interested in this program, look into your heart and see if you really want to do this work or not. Once you began, your life changes, and your head doesn't go back to where it was. When you start to see the whole, you become a part of it. It doesn't mean you leave your rationality and linear mind behind. This program, unlike indigenous cultures like my Oneida heritage that's still continuous, we're retribalizing all of us who have been disconnected from that and from nature and various parts of ourselves. So as we come back into our holism, we still we still keep the conscious, linear, rational mind watching what's going on, but it simply is given a place where it's more comfortable, where it's embraced in all of life. And then we find out how deeply we are loved.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Apela, I'm so grateful you're mentioning this, because through my experience, this was a very important thing for me to be aware of. And Jurgen, when I was losing my mind in the class, I told one of my elders, I don't know if I can do this work. It's just making me crazy. And his response to me, because he had great respect for the program and what we were doing, he said, it takes a mad woman to do this work. So Apela, I think you just affirmed that for all of us, and not mad in a crazy way, but mad in a way of really seeking the knowledge and seeking to go deeper and deeper, as you said, even being in the shadows at times and learning to navigate that. Jurgen, any comment on that?
Well, I think you described it very well. I think you know, it's like you know, there's a sense of feeling a little crazy when we go to the edge and when we're actually true to our vision and true to our creativity, because that's not conformity. There's comfort in conformity. But when we're on the cutting edge, when we follow you know, the dream that is in the interconnections, the groundedness that is in our entanglements with nature, with the world, it feels a little crazy from, you know, from kind of mainstream culture. And it really, I always say, well, that's a sign that you're doing it right, that you are, you know, right on it, because a part of you kind of gets shed, you know, like a snake skin, you know, shedding the skin. And that feels a little crazy because your identity, your sense of presence is shifting. And that's scary. You know, I had to deal with it being German. I had to deal with the history of the Holocaust, the Shoah. You know, I had to deal with any number of shadow issues. And doing that and confronting that was hard. At times I thought, I'm falling into an abyss here. You know, where am I going with this? And actually confronting it and engaging with it led to a sense of comfort, of groundedness. It gave me a confidence in what I needed to do, both in my personal life, but also in my academic life. That was very clear. It was a very clear direction that came out of that. And, now and then I do feel crazy when I talk to some people, to other academics. And that's part of, I think, being on the visionary edge and say, here, this is the most urgent work that needs to be done. This is what we need to create peace. This is what we need to create balance in the world. And we need to step out and be in front.
It's related to a statement that you made about reframing the mainstream psychology to an Indigenous perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, mainstream psychology looks at the individual and disconnected from all kinds of contexts. And that's the paradigm. It's individualistic. When you look at it from an indigenous perspective, we need to look at the psyche. We need to look at who we are. We need to look at identity as interconnected, as grounded in community. And when I say community, I don't just mean other humans. Community includes the mountains and the trees and the rivers. All of that is part of community that we need to be in conversation with. And that is what is healing, that's what's nurturing, and that's what's grounding. So reframing, I recently wrote a chapter in abnormal psychology, and I looked at the web. Nature is an incredible healer, and Western psychology doesn't use nature, for example, right? So reframing the issues of personal psychological suffering in the larger context of indigenous mind, of interconnections, is something that I think we need to do. And that's also how we balance ourselves. So doing this peace work, doing this indigenous science work is per se healing. And it helps us being balanced, because we recover where we're coming from, where we need to be, and we can heal the cuts and the separations that are part of almost all of our socializations.
Apela, I think I heard you about to say something.
Yeah, I was place matters in Indigenous ceremonies and Indigenous reality. There's a story that pertains to Costa Rica and to the particular site at the University for Peace. We are partnered, my organization, Worldwide Indigenous Science Network, with UPeace to launch this program. In 1989, at the formation meeting of this organization, we had a ceremony in the Canadian Rockies. And in that ceremony, there were about 50 people. 2/3 were Native American and African and Asian, spiritual, cultural practitioners, shamans from all over the world, and also scientists, physicists, very good scientists. Some had worked with, good science, I don't know, but some had worked with Oppenheimer even. So very high caliber, perhaps that's a better term for them. And as the meeting went on, or the ceremony went on, it was supposed to go on for 2 hours. It went on till about 3 or 4 in the morning. It had rained while we were in the teepee and the fire crackling. And eventually it got to the point where scientists were actually sobbing, and they talked about how hard it was to acquire their discipline and only to see the destruction that their discipline was creating, along with the brilliant insights that evolved, right? So there was a real closeness and an intimacy, a reconciliation that was happening. And along with that, an Aztec man shared the story, the traditional oral prediction of the eagle and the condor, representing northern and southern hemispheres. And essentially, the story says that when the eagle and condor come together, that there will be a reunification of humanity and also head and heart, and we will have peace again. And when we went to Costa Rica, I realized, sitting in the office at UPeace, I looked up and there was a picture of a man named Robert Mueller. When I had just graduated with my PhD, UPeace was founding, and more than anything, I felt the call there. And he was so kind. There was no email in those days, but he would answer my letters, even took a call or two from me. And all these years later, after Jurgen and I worked for almost 30 years developing this program, I found myself at UPeace, and I look up and there's a picture of the late Robert Mueller. So, oh, I finally made it. It took a while, but I made it. So there was that, but then the sense that, wow, this has something to do with eagle and condor. And doing a little bit of Google search, I found out that Costa Rica marks the farthest southern extreme of the eagle's migration. It's as far south as they go, and it's as far north as the condor comes, and they meet right there. And I have a painting of that from 1989, which is going to hang in our office down there. So you can see there's something more that's happening beyond our, and here's the picture that was painted back in 1989, eagle and condor, right? And you see the spirals and life itself moving. You see particle and wave. So the chance for these two ways of knowing and being to come together at the exact spot that it was prophesized or predicted it would come together is very affirming. It's the indigenous science equivalent of rigor and reliability and validity. Here we are.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
here you are too.
Let's just remind everyone that the Indigenous Science and Peace Studies Master's Program is going to begin at University for Peace in January 2022. And let's talk a little bit about what should anyone that's interested in registering and being becoming a part of the program. I believe it's going to be the master's program. Is that correct, Jurgen?
Correct.
Okay. What is there any message that you want to give or anything that you want to say? I mean, you have already, but maybe getting into a little bit more of the logistical part of it.
Well, the logistical part is to, go on the UPeace website and, start putting in an inquiry. And I meet with each potential applicant and have long conversations about it and talk about the program, which includes both, classes that are inquiries about identity, classes that deal with research and with the history of coloniality, and really most importantly, classes that look forward to what to do, and that's ultimately what the program leads to. What is the kind of contribution that a student will make in the future? And the capstone project is one of the places to develop that. And there are, seminars that build up to that, addressing current issues that need attention. But the foundation, is, well, how do we do research in an indigenous ways as opposed to in a Western way? And who are we? In an indigenous sense, and recovering and remembering. So if you're interested, you can go on the website. The study plan is outlined there in all the detail, and I'm happy to set up Zoom calls with anybody who wants to have a conversation with me and to follow up and know more detail. I think the important part is really to see what your calling is. And if this is your calling, then let us know, and we'll talk and figure it out.
Wonderful. Apela, as you all have been talking, I keep thinking about the young lady at the in South Africa and the World Heritage Site, where she's digging the bones of her ancestors. I was feeling that as sort of here we are beginning to bring more people into this process of digging their bones, but metaphorically, not necessarily literally.
Audrey's referring to a time a number of years ago. We were in South Africa at the Cradle of Humankind. And, I often wondered about the work that I was involved with. And I questioned, why was I doing it? I have a degree from Ivy League and a PhD, and I was on a trajectory for fame and fortune. Right? Of course, that didn't really appeal to me that much. My heart was in my Indigenous ways. And growing up, I could see more and more, I'll say from an Oneida perspective, more and more non-Indigenous people coming to Indigenous ceremonies, and in fact, actually crowding Native people out. And so you could see there's a real hunger. And then being half French too, I could see the more that we recovered our Oneida heritage and culture and found out that the power that's lost, you can get it back, right? Mm-hmm. So having learned that, I looked at my French side and I'm like, whoa, totally I'm lost. And then I determined, well, if we Oneida could get our ceremonies back, not just ceremonies, but when you're in the ceremony, things happen. And that's why Native people keep doing ceremonies. Mm-hmm. So for example, in pipe ceremonies, we're in a beat up old building in downtown Milwaukee in the attic. That's the only place we had women, and a couple of women and children and one elder, and doing the pipe ceremonies there. When the spirits came in, the ceiling would go up and down, the doors would open and close on their own, and windows slam. And when the animal spirits came in, you could smell them and feel the floor giving under their feet, right? Mm-hmm. We just thought, because we didn't have that growing up, we just thought that's how it is, right? And actually that is how it is. But what we didn't know is that many tribes, way more culturally intact, we thought, than us, had ceremonies, but it didn't happen. It didn't, the spirits didn't come alive in that way anymore because of colonialism, because of the disconnection Jurgen's talking about. In this Indigenous Science and Peace Studies program, what I learned growing up Oneida, and we had having lost so much of our culture and getting it back in my generation, what I learned through that, and then what I went through reclaiming my French ancestry, including Jurgen talked about the gargoyles at the door, like Nazis, and the misuse of tribal ceremonial iconography and symbols by Hitler, right? He had to go through all of that to get to himself. And for me, when we started this Indigenous science program, it was called Traditional Knowledge. And at the time we started it, I thought it was a refuge, a sanctuary for Indigenous cultural practitioners to come together and to earn a degree studying the best of the West, but coming at it from an Indigenous perspective. That's what I thought it was. And then it became clear we had to let other cultures in, but I didn't want to do it because I thought if we do that, like inside what I thought true confession is if we share these ceremonies, I'll have nothing left. And I also thought my people will have nothing left. But I knew I had to do it. And of course, exact opposite was true. Once I opened up to my whiteness, to my French side, I became emotionally unswayable. I couldn't be thrown by an Indian being in the white world or a white person in the Indian world, right? That healing was amazing for me.
Wow.
But it wasn't easy. And I don't know, you were with me, I think. No, I think you were with me, but this was West Africa at a big ceremony of Voodoo practitioners. And we ended up going out on a day off to a field visit to Guri Island, which is where African people were sent off as slaves to the New World, to the Caribbean, right? And the place was so horrifying. And when I got in there, I was just barely out of radiation from cancer treatment. I was terribly fragile. And when I got in there, I had just these horrible feelings, of course. And at a certain point, I was told that whereas downstairs was living hell for people chained to walls and so forth, upstairs, people lived the good life and they were French. And when I realized that, I just, I can't even explain the implosion inside of me and the grief. And I wanted to run, but I was in a group of Voodoo and healers and I couldn't, we were just shoulder to shoulder. And we were in this turret where people could jump that refused to go to slavery, could jump out this window to the shark infested waters and rocks below, or they could get onto the ship, right? When we came out of there and we're exiting, and again, I'm surrounded by all these Voodoo and healers. There was one old man, they called him Mamiwata, and he didn't speak English, of course. And he was maybe 2 people away, and he looked over at me as we're surging in this crowd. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, hello, my sister. And I thought, in that moment, like just crying, I thought, if he could forgive me, then it was time for me to find out how to forgive that French side of me too. So these are part of the challenge that you face, but it's only a test, because once you get through it, all of these ancestors come, dreams come, synchronicities happen, chance encounters, and then we find out what our power and what our responsibility is in life. And we come into the ecstasy of the whole mind.
Yes, yes. You know, you answered a question for me. I was going to ask you both to respond to, and that is, you're in both of your statements there of the Indigenous and the Western world coming together for healing that we need right now, given what we're going through in the world. And you just spoke to that so completely through, I interpret it as through that, bringing those parts of ourselves together and being able to forgive the unforgivable, that we then can move forward in more. Maybe you could each respond to that. Jurgen, would you like to go first? We'll come back to Apela as well.
Yeah, and I actually, you know, when Apela was talking, I was thinking of a statement by that she very often quotes about by Rufus, an elder. You know, the powers are not lost; you are lost, and we all have indigenous roots, and we all can gain access to that. And going into the ceremony is where the separations come back together and where the healing happens. Now, Audrey, can you ask a little bit more specifically what you would like me to talk about?
Well, I thought as we come, I'm looking at the time. I was thinking if we could talk about the in both of your statements about the importance of this work, there's a reference to bringing together the Western mind and the Indigenous mind. And Apela did a beautiful demonstration of that. And I
Right.
thought maybe we could talk about the critical aspect of that at this time
Okay.
on the planet.
Jurgen, can I say, I wanted to acknowledge Mahir is on this call with us, and he's a guardian, you could say, of the sacred site where the University of Peace is. So being at this place that has the catalytic power to bring the worlds together and is linked to the United Nations means that for the first time in the history of the encounter between Indigenous and settler people, Indigenous wisdom can be awakened, that fire can be kindled and burned to a clear fire, so that the knowledge that comes out of that not only goes out all over the world through graduates, but can go up the chain to the UN. And part of the way we amplify that also is that we're launching a research institute, a companion organization to the academic program. And students will have some opportunities with that as well. But really, for the first time in history, through this program, the seminal program, there is the opportunity for Indigenous wisdom to be heard globally and to join with Western knowing, so that it's catalytic and powerful beyond either of the two to transform what needs transforming now, basically to save life.
And that's really critical, that there is something new that can emerge and that needs to emerge out of this, a new synthesis, a new vision, because the paradigm that we've been working in has proven itself to be insufficient to address the challenges. And there are cutting edge developments in Western sciences that actually meet up with Indigenous understandings. And the Indigenous understanding is an integrative way of knowledge, which is not just about knowing, it's about being, it's about presence. And when we talk about ceremony, there's something in ceremony that integrates, that brings together. And that's what we need to do in order to address our crises and our challenges, because that's what makes us present. If we're just in our left brain, that is insufficient. We have failed to think it through. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of good knowledge, but we have failed to integrate it. And that integration doesn't just come through rationalism, it also needs the right mind, and the ceremonial mind and the ceremonial present, that transformation that we've talked about, to bring this knowledge together and catalyze the change that we need in order for this planet to survive, in order for the people to survive.
And the last thing I wanted to say on this is that you'll notice in this call, we had unprecedented technical problems. Jurgen couldn't even go on. Audrey's voice could hardly be heard most of the time at the very beginning, and then it's smoothed out. That's the way of ceremony too, and that's the way of this program, I might add. Means we're on the right track.
Mahir, I know we are going to open up for questions, but I wanted to know if you had anything that you would like to add to our talk today.
Well, this most definitely has been instructional to me as well. I have learned a lot from this, and Apela mentioned that place matters. I had actually never given it a thought. I knew the story of the eagle and the condor, but I had never given a thought that the Costa Rica is as far as the eagle goes from the north, and from the south, this is as far as the condor goes. I think there is something deeply symbolic in the fact that Worldwide Indigenous Science Network and UPeace have partnered. on this program. I myself study and teach Indigenous people's rights, but that's from a very legal perspective. It's not real. It's far away from the lived experience that Apela and Jurgen have been talking about. I definitely agree that the confluence of Indigenous and Western knowledge is most definitely what is needed. We live in a world where we believe things rather than seeking things. And I think what this program is all about is seeking rather than just believing what is told to you by either the mainstream knowledge that is produced from a particular perspective. So I'd like to thank both of you for enlightening me, and I think giving all of us a wonderful pathway to exploring ourselves and the realities and how everything is interconnected. That inward looking lens is definitely something that I look forward to participating also personally in as the program is launched in January. So thank you very much. I think it's time now to open up the floor for questions or comments from our participants. Anyone wanting to speak, please raise your hand so that I can acknowledge you and I can give you the floor.
We hear there's a question in the chat about scholarships. Can you maybe address that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at the program. Yes, so there are two types of scholarships for this program. One is a 30% waiver, which is generally applicable to all programs at UPs, and these are offered to citizens or nationals of the 42 countries that have ratified the international agreement establishing the University for Peace. So being signatory states, the nationals of these countries do benefit directly, automatically from a 30% waiver. Students who have received an undergraduate or graduate degree from a partner university, that list is on the web page. They also automatically benefit from a 30% waiver. We have the Peace Corps veterans, they benefit from this waiver as well. In addition, there is a 50% tuition waiver that's automatic. These are applicable to professors from a partner university, Costa Rican citizens and residents being the host country, obviously, and documented refugees or asylees. And Jurgen, I believe we've also offered these waivers to persons identifying themselves as indigenous. And that is definitely something that we be hoping would benefit a large constituency.
Yes.
There is a question from Joe. What are your thoughts concerning a two ways of seeing approach to medicine, healing, and therapy?
Well, the basic answer is it applies to all these fields, because it is about, for one, when you talk about psychology and medicine, separation of body and mind, and spirit is not even in there unless you talk about transpersonal medicine or transpersonal psychology. But from an indigenous perspective, it is, whatever people are dealing with is seen in an integrative way, and that's how the healing happens. Now, in an integrative way, you pull on what is the best of indigenous knowledge, you pull on what's the best in Western knowledge. So so you intervene in a holistic context. But that includes, Western knowledge, maybe medication, maybe, surgery, maybe, whatever it is. So these two ways, are really, they're held in an integrative and in a holistic or indigenous paradigm to bring all the knowledge together.
I just wanted to mention there's one of our partner organizations, Pro Metra, in existence as long as WISN, over 30 years, brings together traditional indigenous voodoo practitioners with Western medicine. And it's so successful, it's now in 27 different countries. So you might Google that and take a look at what Prometra is doing.
There are various examples, even at UC Merced, where traditional Hmong healers and Western doctors work together, and you find the same in various native nations on this continent, where in hospitals, traditional healers and Western medicine work together.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question on the chat box. What was the name of the organization to Google, the spelling of it particularly?
I'm sorry,
The-
Prometra. Let's see, can I get it? Let me see. It's Prometra, but I'll write it in here.
Oh, with the Q at the end.
No,
No,
Right.
that's correct. Yeah.
I don't see any hands up. Any more questions? Yes, we do have one from Yael. Shalom, thank you for all the work you do. Where can I find the list of 42 nationalities that UPeace works with? Specifically, I have a Palestinian friend who fled Gaza to Egypt and is now stuck there. Yes, so in cases such as this, there are other ways to get a scholarship, particularly if the person is a refugee or asylum seeker or comes under one of the mandates of the UNRWA or UNHCR, which most likely will be the case in the case of your friend. That person will be benefiting from the waivers as well. But the list of countries that are parties to the UPeace treaty, you go to the web page that I have shared on the chat box. And then there is a link at the top bar for cost and financial aid. And there you will find a link to the 42 countries that are part of the University for Peace. But I have a better way, in fact, and I have more direct link to that, which is here. So you can perhaps click on this link as well, and you will have the list of countries that are parties.
I noticed on the chat, someone is asking about the physicists that helped launch this work with the Worldwide Indigenous Science Network back in 1989 in our organizing meetings. We were supported by physicist Dr. David Bohm, who was the protege to Einstein, and then his protege, David Peat, and also David Suzuki. We had a lot of Davids for some reason, and Dr. Elizabeth Saturas, Gaia biologist, many other brilliant scientists helped establish this work. And in the American Indian Science and Engineering Society's journal, the ACES journal, they wrote about this new program that we're talking about today and described it as a breakthrough in education. And I feel pretty happy about that. And I think you will too.
There's a question to me from Yolandi, and I think it's applicable to everyone, so I'll just read it and address that. The question is specifically concerning COVID restrictions worldwide. Is the 2022 course on-site in Costa Rica or predominantly online? Well, we did not shut down the campus at any point, even during the height of the pandemic earlier this year or last year. Now, all our courses are taking place on site, but we do realize that some people or some students are not able to travel because of restrictions at their end. And in such cases, we are conducting our classes in a hybrid manner, which means that students in the classroom and the classes are live streamed to those who are not able to join, and they are taking those classes by internet, but they are all together in a synchronous manner at the same time. Yeah, so we have set up a very good system since the pandemic began. I think since in Costa Rica since March of 2020, and all the technology has been set up for ensuring seamless, classes in a hybrid fashion. So that has been the case. We will be beginning a regular academic year next week, and out of in our 9 master's programs at least, and out of the 130 odd people that have registered for those 9 master's degree programs, about 90 to 92 people will already be flying to Costa Rica. And most of them are here, while some are not able to because of travel restrictions, but they will be taking those classes live by joining online. Yeah, so and we don't expect the campus to be off either. Jurgen, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to add, and you can probably explain it better than I can, but the required courses for the program, they will be scheduled during the morning. And in the remaining time, there's also access to other programs. So you can enrich what you are doing by pulling on the incredible resources that the various programs offer. So if you for example, more interested in, say, legal issues, indigenous rights, you take a class with me here, or, there are classes on sustainability and various other areas that can help make your course of study richer.
There is another question from Yolandi. Is travel involved to sacred sites? And that is something, Jurgen, you may want to address.
Yeah, and so the suggestion is that, as part of your course of study, that you also travel to your ancestral sacred sites. And so that is something that would be, that we recommend, and that's something that can also be part of your capstone project, depending on what you are doing. So going to sacred sites and doing ceremony is, integral to the program.
Yeah. Forrest is asking, can you share about the indigenous elders that may be invited to visit and speak, and the intentions around what part this will be to the program?
Apela, do you want to say something about that?
Sure, I just answered Forrest in the chat, and I said, it's too much. I can't, there's not time to do it, but I encouraged him to go on the WISN website and to see the elders we work with. Many will be drawn from that network of Indigenous cultural practitioners. And I have spent my entire life since my 20s going out and looking or encountering these people, and with their agreement coming into association. These are just extraordinarily accomplished elders and healers and cultural practitioners from all over the world.
I have a substantive question on the content of your discussions today, but also a logistical question from Yolandi. So I'll just address that very quickly. The question is about whether vaccination is mandatory to study on site. Not at this point. Costa Rica has not made vaccination mandatory for entering the country and studying. However, they do require a PCR test to be done to about 48 hours before your travel began, to indicate that you are not infected at this point. So that's not a requirement for entering or studying in Costa Rica. The question from Michelle is, I would be interested to hear from Apela and or Jurgen more about connecting with indigenous European roots, positive and strength aspects, as well as shadow, if anything comes to mind.
Sure, I can say something about that. When we look at European history, part of what we have to deal with, and part of what I had to deal with personally, is tracing and acknowledging the disconnections, the separations that have happened over time. So when I looked back in history, well, first, there was obviously the Third Reich, the Shoah, the Holocaust that I needed to address. And you go further beyond that, you deal with the Middle Ages and the witch hunts. And you go further back and you look at the patriarchal Vikings where, raping and pillaging was part of their initiation rite. You go out and you come back, a rich man. But then if you go beyond that and all of that, whatever we know, there is something that is primarily written up by the Christian missionaries. But if you go beyond that, you come to these layers, and this is true, in all the European cultures, where there is a paradigm that has the same qualities that we find in indigenous people today. And acknowledging that, identifying that is part of the healing. And it's not just personal healing, it's also cultural healing. Because when you look at it, all that knowledge is labeled as primitive, as something that has nothing to offer. And the so-called witches in the Middle Ages, who were they? They were midwives. They had herbal knowledge. They knew how to bring new life forth, how to help with birth. So that ancient knowledge, integrating that, is something that is important in taking away the label of the primitive. So that is the challenge of going there. So there is dealing with the shadow of, how come we are in this problematic crisis these days, and the beauty of when we discover what's there. I just completed an article on hope in which I discuss the ancient Germanic Nordic image of the well of memory, and the three women who are at the well of memory. And they are remembering, they are, helping understand what is my obligation in life, what am I to do in life, and they help us with making us present. So there are ancient images and stories in there that help us become whole again when we work with them, not just with our minds, but in ceremony, when we go to these places where we internally become whole again, so that we become whole within the community that is the world around us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jurgen. At this point, I don't see any hands or questions in the chat box. Dr. Jeff is saying, remember to check out Apela Colorado's book, Woman Between the Worlds. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think, Audrey, are we on time to close this webinar?
You're muted.
Yes, we are right on time. And I want to thank everybody for being a part of our program. And Mahir, thank you so much for supporting the work that is being done. I mean, we really have to say thank you to you and the university, because this is so critical that this work continues. Thank you, Dr. Apela Colorado, Women Between the World, and Jurgen as well. Beth, thank you for all your help in getting us all on, and just such a good experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. And Audrey, thank you for doing such a great job with hosting this and facilitating this. If possible, if everyone wants to stay for just another moment, we have a short clip, an audio clip for anyone that might like to hear one of our Indigenous cultural practitioners in his beautiful chant.
Beth, we lost the chant. I think you muted yourself.
That was it. It just started to repeat. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And feel free to send me an email with any questions, comments, things to discuss. You're always welcome, and I'm happy to set up conversations.
Hope to see you soon, virtually and in Costa Rica.
Take care, everybody.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.